the dog was harmless, until a child walked past the fence. At first, it looked like a simple neighborhood argument. One mother said her little girl had been bitten by the neighbor's dog. The dog owner said that was impossible, because his dog was gentle, calm, and had never hurt anyone. But inside that courtroom, one question changed everything. If the dog was so harmless, why had 3 different people already warned him? This case began with a child walking home from school. It ended with medical bills, torn clothing, a terrified family, a neighbor accused of lying, and a judge who wanted one thing only: the truth. And by the time the evidence came out, the dog owner's calm confidence started to look a lot less like innocence, and a lot more like denial. 1 o'clock, case intro. The plaintiff was Melissa Grant, a single mother from a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. She came to court asking for $8,742. That amount included emergency room bills, follow-up treatment, counseling sessions for her daughter, 2 missed days of work, and the cost of replacing a school backpack and jacket that were ripped during the incident. Her daughter, 8-year-old Sophie, was not in the courtroom. Melissa said the experience had left her afraid of walking down her own street. Across from her stood the defendant, Daniel Pierce. Daniel was Melissa's next-door neighbor. He owned a large mixed-breed dog named Ranger. According to Daniel, Ranger was not aggressive. He called him a calm family dog. He said Ranger barked at strangers sometimes, but he had never attacked anyone. And from the outside, Daniel looked composed. He had papers in a folder. He had photos of the dog. He had a calm voice. But courtroom cases are not decided by confidence. They are decided by facts. And the first problem for Daniel was this: Melissa was not the first person to complain about Ranger. 220. Plaintiff story. Melissa told the court that the incident happened on a Tuesday afternoon, just after 3:30 p.m. Sophie had gotten off the school bus at the end of the block. She was walking home on the sidewalk, carrying her backpack, lunchbox, and a small art project she had made in class. Melissa said she was standing on her front porch waiting for her daughter, like she did almost every day. That was when she heard barking. Not one bark, not a warning bark. A sudden, explosive kind of barking. Then she heard Sophie scream. Melissa ran toward the sidewalk and saw Ranger halfway through the opening in Daniel's front gate. The dog had lunged forward and bitten Sophie on the lower leg. According to Melissa, Sophie fell backward onto the sidewalk, and the dog grabbed at her jacket sleeve before Daniel came running from the driveway. Melissa said Daniel pulled the dog back by the collar and kept repeating, "He doesn't bite. He doesn't bite." But Sophie's leg was bleeding. Her jacket sleeve was torn, and the child was shaking so badly she could barely speak. Melissa called 911. An ambulance was not required, but she took Sophie to urgent care and later to the emergency room because the bite wound was deeper than it first appeared. The medical paperwork showed puncture wounds, bruising, swelling, antibiotics, and a follow-up visit. Melissa's voice cracked when she described what happened after. Sophie stopped wanting to walk to the bus. She woke up crying twice that week. And when she saw a dog outside a grocery store, she froze behind her mother and refused to move. Melissa told the judge, "I am not here because I hate dogs. I am here because my neighbor knew his dog scared people, and he still left that gate unsecured." That was the heart of her case. Not simply that a dog bite happened, but that Daniel had been warned. And then Melissa said something Daniel immediately denied. She said this was not Ranger's first problem. 430, history of complaints. Melissa explained that Daniel had lived next door for about 2 years. At first, she had no issue with him. They waved to each other, they took in each other's trash bins. They had what she called a normal neighbor relationship. But about 6 months before the bite, Ranger started getting more reactive near the fence. Whenever kids rode bikes past the house, Ranger would bark, throw his body against the gate, and scratch at the wooden panels. Melissa said she texted Daniel twice about it. The first time she wrote, "Hey, your dog scared Sophie today when she walked by. Can you please make sure the gate is closed?" Daniel replied, "He's loud, but he's harmless." The second time, after Ranger jumped against the fence while Sophie was walking with a friend, Melissa texted again. This time Daniel wrote, "Kids need to stop running near my yard. He's just protecting the property." That message became important later. Because in court, Daniel would claim he had no idea Ranger made children nervous. Melissa also brought up another neighbor, Mr. Fields, who allegedly told Daniel that Ranger had snapped at him through the fence while he was picking up a package that had been delivered to the wrong house, and there was a delivery driver who had filed a complaint after Ranger chased him to the edge of the driveway. Daniel shook his head while Melissa spoke. He looked annoyed, not shocked, annoyed. That difference mattered, because when a person is hearing something false for the first time, they usually react with confusion. Daniel looked like a man who had heard the same accusation before. 6 o'clock. Defendant reply. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he was very clear. He said Ranger did not attack Sophie. He said, Sophie startled the dog. According to him, the child came too close to the gate while running, waving her school project and making loud noises. He claimed Ranger got excited, pushed the gate open with his nose, and jumped toward her. Daniel insisted the wound was not a bite. He said it could have been a scratch from Ranger's paw. He also said Melissa exaggerated the injury to get money from him. His words were calm, but the accusation was serious. He was saying a mother had turned a frightening accident into a payday. The judge did not react emotionally. She simply asked, "Are you saying the child was not bitten?" Daniel answered, "I'm saying I didn't see a bite happen." That answer sounded small. But in court, small wording can expose a big problem. Because Daniel had just shifted from, "the dog didn't bite her," to, "I didn't see a bite happen." Those are not the same thing, and the judge caught it immediately. 7:25. Judge-style questioning begins. The judge leaned forward and asked Daniel where he was standing when the incident happened. Daniel said he was in the driveway, unloading groceries from this car. The judge asked how far he was from the gate. Daniel said maybe 15 feet. The judge asked if his view was clear. Daniel hesitated. He said, "Mostly." The judge said, "Mostly means no." Daniel explained that his SUV door was open, and he turned when he heard barking. By the time he looked, Ranger was already near Sophie. The judge asked, "So you did not see the moment the dog made contact with the child?" Daniel said, "No, but I know my dog." The judge's expression changed. That was not an answer. That was belief. And belief does not erase blood, medical records, or prior warnings. The judge asked Daniel if the gate was latched. He said yes. Then she asked how the dog got out. Daniel said Ranger must have pushed it open. The courtroom went quiet, because if a dog can push a latched gate open, then the gate is not secure. And if the gate was not secure, that was Daniel's responsibility. Daniel tried to explain that the latch usually worked. The judge interrupted. Usually is not a defense when a child is bleeding on the sidewalk. 8:50, Daniel's defense deepens. Daniel then tried to shift the focus to Sophie's behavior. He said children in the neighborhood often teased Ranger. He said they ran past the fence, barked back at the dog, and sometimes tossed sticks into his yard. Melissa immediately objected. She said Sophie had never teased the dog. Daniel said he could not prove Sophie had teased Ranger that day, but he believed the neighborhood kids had made the dog nervous over time. The judge asked Daniel for evidence. Photos, videos, messages, anything. Daniel had none. He had only a general complaint about children. And that was not enough. The judge asked, "Do you have any proof this child provoked your dog?" Daniel said, "No, but she was close to my property." The judge replied, "The sidewalk is not your property." That line landed hard, because it clarified the entire dispute. Sophie was not inside Daniel's yard, she was not climbing his fence. She was not reaching through the gate. She was walking on a public sidewalk. Daniel's dog came out. That changed everything. But then Daniel opened his folder and handed the judge a photo that he thought would help him. It did the opposite. 10:20, the photo that backfired. Daniel submitted a printed photo of Ranger lying on the living room floor next to a toddler. He said it proved Ranger was safe around children. The dog looked relaxed in the photo. The toddler was smiling. At first glance, it supported Daniel's argument. But the judge looked at the photo for only a few seconds before asking a simple question. Is this your nephew? Daniel said yes. The judge asked, does Ranger know this child? Daniel said, of course. The judge said, then this tells me how your dog behaves with a familiar child inside your home. It tells me nothing about how your dog behaves when an unfamiliar child walks past your gate. That was the difference Daniel kept avoiding. A dog can be gentle with family and still be dangerous around strangers. A dog can sleep beside a toddler and still lunge at a child on a sidewalk. A calm photo is not a safety record. It is a moment. And the judge was not deciding a moment. She was deciding responsibility. 1135. Plaintiff. Evidence, medical records. Melissa then presented the medical records. The paperwork described the injury as a dog bite. There were 2 puncture wounds on Sophie's right calf, bruising around the wound, and a note recommending antibiotics due to risk of infection. Daniel argued that medical providers only wrote dog bite because Melissa told them it was a dog bite. The judge asked him if he had any medical training. He said no. She asked if he examined the wound. He said he saw it briefly. She asked if he had photos from that day. He said no. Melissa did. She had taken pictures at urgent care. The judge reviewed them silently. Then she asked Daniel, you believe a paw scratch made 2 puncture marks? Daniel tried to answer, but the confidence was gone. He said, I'm just saying I don't think Ranger meant to hurt her. The judge replied, intent is not the issue, injury is the issue. And then came the text messages. The messages Daniel hoped the court would not focus on. 1300, text messages. Melissa had printed copies of text conversations between her and Daniel. The first message was from March. Melissa wrote that Ranger had scared Sophie near the gate. Daniel replied, he is harmless. He just barks. The second message was from April. Melissa wrote, the gate looked open again today, please be careful, Sophie is scared to pass your house. Daniel replied, then have her cross the street. The judge read that line twice, then have her cross the street. That response was damaging, not because it admitted the dog had bitten anyone before, but because it showed Daniel knew there was an ongoing issue. He knew a child was afraid to pass his house. He knew the gate was a concern, and his solution was not to secure the dog. It was to tell the child to avoid the sidewalk. The judge asked Daniel why he wrote that. Daniel said he was frustrated. The judge said frustration does not make a dangerous condition disappear. Daniel tried to say the texts were taken out of context. The judge asked for the full conversation. Melissa had it. Daniel did not. That also mattered. Because when someone says a message is out of context, they need to provide the context. Daniel had only the phrase, Melissa had the thread. 1430, retention hook, the witness. At this point, the case already looked bad for Daniel. But it was not over. Because the strongest evidence did not come from Melissa, it came from a neighbor who had no reason to choose sides. His name was Robert Fields. He lived across the street. He was retired. He had lived in the neighborhood for 23 years. And he had seen the bite happen from his garage. Robert testified that he was taking recycling bins to the curb when he heard Ranger barking. He looked up and saw Sophie walking down the sidewalk. He said Sophie was not running. She was not screaming. She was not waving anything at the dog. She was walking normally. According to Robert, Ranger hit the gate twice. On the second hit, the gate opened. The dog came out fast. Sophie stepped backward. Ranger lunged at her leg. Robert said the entire thing happened in seconds. Daniel asked Robert if he was sure Sophie had not provoked the dog. Robert answered, I am sure. Daniel asked if Robert disliked him. Robert said, I dislike loose dogs. That's different. The judge almost smiled, but she stayed focused. Because Robert's testimony matched the medical records, it matched Melissa's timeline, and it contradicted Daniel's theory. 1610, the security camera reveal. Then Melissa revealed one more piece of evidence. A security camera clip from Robert's garage. The video did not have perfect audio. It did not show everything in close-up, but it showed enough. It showed Sophie walking on the sidewalk. It showed Ranger throwing himself against the gate. It showed the gate swinging open. It showed Sophie stepping back. Then the dog rushed forward. The actual bite happened partially behind the parked car, but the aftermath was visible. Sophie fell. Melissa ran. Daniel grabbed Ranger. The judge watched the clip twice. Daniel watched it once and looked down. That was the moment the courtroom shifted, because until then, Daniel had been arguing possibilities. Maybe Sophie ran, maybe Sophie teased the dog, maybe it was not a bite, maybe the dog only scratched her. But video has a way of removing maybe, not always completely. But enough. And in this case, enough was damaging. Still, Daniel had one final argument. And it revealed the biggest problem with his defense. 1745, defendant's final argument. Daniel said he felt sorry Sophie was hurt. But he insisted he should not have to pay the full amount. He argued that Melissa's bills were too high. He questioned the counseling sessions. He said children get scared and move on. That statement changed the temperature in the courtroom. The judge asked him to repeat it. Daniel said, "I just mean kids are resilient." The judge answered, "Children can be resilient. That does not give adults permission to be careless." Melissa explained that Sophie's pediatrician recommended counseling after Sophie began having nightmares and panic reactions around dogs. She submitted 2 invoices. The judge reviewed them. They were not excessive. They were not years of treatment. They were limited sessions after a frightening injury. Daniel then questioned Melissa's missed work. Melissa had documentation from her employer showing 2 unpaid days. 1 day for urgent care and follow-up, 1 day because Sophie refused to go to school the morning after the bite and had a doctor appointment later that day. The judge accepted the documentation. Daniel's defense was getting smaller. At first, he denied the dog bite. Then he blamed the child. Then he questioned the bills. Then he minimized the fear. Each step made him look less responsible. Not more. 1920, the prior warning. Just when it seemed the evidence was complete, the judge asked one final question. Has animal control ever contacted you about this dog before? Daniel paused. A long pause. Then he said, not officially. The judge asked what that meant. Daniel admitted that a delivery driver had complained months earlier after Ranger chased him near the driveway. Animal control left a notice at Daniel's home reminding him to secure the dog. Daniel said it was not a citation, just a warning. But that warning mattered. Because it proved Daniel had been told by someone outside the neighbor dispute that Ranger needed to be secured. Not by Melissa, not by a child. Not by an angry neighbor, by animal control. Melissa did not even know about that notice until court. The judge asked Daniel why he had not mentioned it earlier. Daniel said he did not think it was relevant. The judge said, a prior warning about securing the same dog is exactly relevant. And that was the end of Daniel's credibility. 2050, verdict. The judge began the verdict by making one thing clear. This case was not about whether Ranger was always a bad dog, it was not about whether Daniel loved his dog. It was not about whether dogs bark, the case was about control. A dog owner has a responsibility to keep their animal secured. Especially when they know the animal reacts aggressively near children, delivery workers, or people passing by. Daniel had prior warnings. He had text messages. He had a gate that could be pushed open, and because that gate failed, a child was injured. The judge found Daniel responsible. She awarded Melissa the documented medical expenses. She awarded the counseling costs. She awarded the missed wages. She awarded the replacement cost for the torn jacket and backpack. She also included the filing fee. The total judgment came to $8,316. Not every dollar Melissa requested was granted. The judge reduced one small portion that was not supported by receipts. But the main claim stood: Daniel had to pay. The judge ended with a direct statement: when your dog scares people, you do not tell children to cross the street. You secure your dog. 2220. Moral lesson. This case left the courtroom with a lesson that is simple but often ignored. A dog does not have to be evil to be dangerous. An owner does not have to be cruel to be responsible. And a warning does not need to come in the form of a tragedy before it should be taken seriously. Daniel believed Ranger was harmless because Ranger was calm at home. But responsibility begins where comfort ends. The sidewalk belonged to the public. The gate belonged to Daniel. The dog belonged to Daniel. And when all three met on one afternoon, the person with the most control tried to accept the least responsibility. That is why the verdict went the way it did, not because the court hated dogs, not because a mother cried, but because the evidence told a clear story. A child walked home, a dog got loose, the owner had been warned, and the injury could have been prevented. 2335. CTA. Now, here is the question. Do you think the judge got this one right? Should Daniel have paid the full amount? Or do you think the mother asked for too much? Drop your verdict in the comments. Plaintiff or defendant, who would you side with? And tell us where you are watching from, city, state, or country. I read the comments, and cases like this always bring out strong opinions. Because almost everyone has had a neighbor, a dog, a fence, or a warning that someone ignored. Subscribe for more courtroom case recaps, and watch the next case where one piece of evidence changed everything.